Facilitating. So today, the schedule for our 2 hours from now until 3 o'clock, I'll do a brief overview of Occupy Chapel Hill and the origin of our roundtable today. Then we will move into the first of two questions. Question number one, what are the goals, or what should the goals be for Occupy Chapel Hill Carborough? We'll spend about 35 minutes. Question number two, what are tactics most appropriate to accommodate our goals? Tactics. 35 minutes. And we'll conclude with about 45 to 50 minutes of open discussion. I'd like us to limit our comments to about 1 minute. So stay relatively short-winded so as to give everybody a chance to say what they have to say. Now,
we have a timekeeper.
Since we are relatively a small group, we may expand pretty quickly. We potentially could go more than 1 minute, but you can say a lot in 1 minute, and part of our process.
35 minutes.
Thanks, Alex.
Tell me when to.
I will do it. Part of our process here is that, for those of you new to Occupy Chapel Hill Carborough, is that we don't interrupt each other. Everybody speaks openly and without interruption. However, when someone's making a comment, and if you agree, if you like it, without speaking, you can twinkle. Okay? If you are sort of lukewarm on an idea that someone puts on the table, you are sort of lukewarm. And if you find objectionable an idea that someone puts on the table, you sort of down twinkle. I may, from time to time, ask for a point of clarification as facilitator. If someone brings in, for example, an academic term that may not be familiar to everyone, I will ask for some clarification. Otherwise, I am not participating. I am facilitating only. Alice Lloyd from Friends Meeting, generous.
Carlton.
Alice Carlton.
There is an Alice Lloyd.
One of the problems that accrues with old age, and I apologize from the beginning, Alice. I'm sorry about this. Alice generally has agreed to be timekeeper and will also signal at the end of 1 minute and at the end of the first question period 35 minutes. So, briefly, Occupy Chapel Hill Carborough, for those of you not familiar, we are 5 weeks and 2 days old.
Woo!
We have 12 active working groups. We have a very active and sophisticated web presence. OccupyChapelHill.org. We have a radio presence on WCOM in Carborough every Tuesday morning from 11 to 12 with host John Paul. We have conducted successfully a number of direct actions, including marching on Bank of America and Wells Fargo. We participated in good numbers at the Duke Energy rate hike hearing over in Durham a few weeks ago. Many of us have participated in the Keystone Pipeline protest up in D.C. We earned a major victory on that issue. We meet daily at 6 o'clock for our GA General Assembly. We have an organized process. We have not been without discussion about process. We are in our infancy, but growing and learning to work extremely well together. Now, everyone is welcome to support. That's what a people's movement is about, is inclusiveness and getting everybody involved. Now, many of you likely are aware of events that took place at the Chrysler Building last Sunday. The Chapel Hill Police intervened on peaceful protesters inside the old Yates Motor Dealership building. An excellent discussion followed next night, Monday, at our GA, and it was proposed that we have a roundtable to discuss goals and tactics of Occupy Chapel Hill Carborough, especially in light of those events last Sunday. So, here we are. Welcome, and I'm so glad that everybody's here. I hope that our numbers grow. So, let's begin. If there's a point that needs clarification, as I mentioned, I'll go like this. I'll signal the triangle. And if there's a point of information that's needed, I'll go like this, okay, which is I for information. where I'll ask somebody to clarify a term that may not be familiar to everyone. All right. Question number one. What should be the goals of Occupy Chapel Hill, Scarborough? Chair?
I feel the goal should be to create a new society where society is based around society, not around businesses.
Thank you. Anything else on that? Okay, thanks.
To act as an umbrella with which to unite the left and draw in other disaffected people and do things to reach disaffected people who have been adversely affected by capitalism.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for keeping it succinct. Thanks. Please.
I see one of our primary goals creating awareness to the public of the situation of the economic / political system right now. So to make people realize who their lives are being run by and how, and kind of bringing into light the wrongs of the system the way it is now.
Thanks. Other folks. James.
Continue to engage in and thereby act as a model of effective horizontal structure to promote that to
Mic check.
society. Sorry, to continue to engage in and thereby act as a model of effective horizontal structuring to promote that to sort of our general society and in hopes of seeing that enactment in larger and larger scale.
And James, let me hold up my eye finger and just simply ask you, if you would, to explain horizontal structuring.
Sure. Horizontal structure, sort of in comparison to vertical structuring, which is, I think, what we're more used to. The idea of top-down, wherein people are sort of disempowered in order to empower leaders or representatives or governments or so on and so forth. Horizontal structuring or flat structuring ensures that there is equal empowerment amongst everyone involved. It is exemplified in models of consensus like we use here. And so it's effectively, to put it short, a system wherein we don't have leaders or governments or representatives, but instead everyone is imbued with an equally sort of empowered voice and has the ability not only to be heard, but to be empowered to sort of put their print on the system, so to speak.
Thanks, James, for the clarification. Thank you. Miriam?
I want to actually follow the one that's coming so far.
Can you speak up?
Add a little bit. Hear me to horizontal structure and organizing. It also means, like they're doing in New York, reaching out to many of us.
Everybody here hearing okay? Okay, let's do a mic check. Everybody, so Miriam, stop at every 4 or 5 words, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh dear, okay. But you heard me so far.
You heard me so far.
Don't do it. I'll just speak louder. I promise. But again, the horizontal structuring that I'm most eager to have Occupy do is to reach out into the communities of struggle right here, connecting to the struggles, of course, around the country. There are people working, including activists, right part of Occupy, that are working on housing, a disgrace in our communities, becoming less and less affordable to live in. Healthcare, which is being redefined and inaccessible. Jobs, which are disappearing. Student protests over the damn tuition hikes and the debt they're going to have to assume. All of these things are being worked on in this community. We need to reach out to the churches, the faith organizations, the workers' struggles, the student struggles that are going on in this community right now, and let Occupy amplify their voices. Because many of them will do what I call the legislative or the lobbying route. That's a tactic we can talk about later. But we would lend and amplify and support their voices for justice.
Thanks, Miriam. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind just saying your name. I'm
My
sorry.
name's Candace.
Sorry, I don't know it.
I think that we need to work on some concrete projects that lead to more viable economic alternatives that make that economic reality accessible to people outside of the church as well. I have some examples, but I can leave those for later.
Now we have 45
Oh,
seconds left.
okay. I think I've been finding out this information about what's termed a solidarity economy, and I think it would be great if we created a project where we can kind of like look at what's in our area and map it and circulate it widely. I think the outreach to small businesses that we're doing is great. I think that development of an accountability tracking device or app, something that we can look at businesses in the area and see which ones are treating workers fairly, which ones are not, which ones have fair products. I think that would be really great. And I also think that there are some organizations in the area that do re-education to big corporations and work for taxes and fair budgeting for people, and I think we need to reach out to them and see if they can come and work with us to re-educate some of the bigger companies in the area. So,
excellent use of your 60 seconds. Amazing, amazing. Thanks. Maria?
Hi, Maria. I see the Occupy movement and the Occupy movement in this town as a challenge to the oppressive system that is brutal to those without privilege and that is stressful and numbing to those of us who do have privilege. And I think that challenge has to make us all, including me, somewhat uncomfortable at times. And that's what I see the function as. And then bringing us all together, let's move dialogue in that direction.
Yes, I think you'll have a lot to say during question number 2.
Maybe.
Thanks. Pete?
To me, one of the geniuses of the Occupy Wall Street movement was the 99% versus 1%, and I think that really focused on the control of the 1% through the political system, through the economic system, through the social system, through the media system, through all those systems. It focused it, and it focused it about the unity against that 1%, and the fact that, of course, that 1% is sucking up all the power and money in the society. And I think the consequence of that, there's a really great book on the growth, on how social movements work. It's called Doing Democracy by a guy named Bill Moyer. That's not Moyers, but Moyer. And what basically he says is that social movements grow and become powerful and win by capturing the majority, by really relating to the majority. And I think that our goal has to be very much informed by the notion that there's 2-to-1 nationally and probably 4-to-1 in Chapel Hill and Scarborough that identify or support this movement. And they're asking themselves, what side are they on? Are they on the side of the Occupy movement? And they're asking themselves, what is that? Is it the folks that focus on that 1% and the injustice, or is it about engaging, battling with police or engaging with police, or is it a police protesters thing? And so I think that our goal has to be to focus on that core 1% versus 99%, and begin to build a broad political and other, and I don't mean just electoral, but movement power to change that.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks. Steve?
I would say for a long time I was seeing in general my role as being to help raise awareness, like I heard mentioned over here. I think people are naturally kind of waking up, and maybe there's a need for people to help channel that a little bit. More and more, I'm thinking that the best way to raise awareness is through specific actions that people can dip their toe in the water and sort of latch onto as maybe an easy start. It's like getting them started on the whole path. And so I'm more and more thinking of terms of specific actions that could be done, but that by getting people to joining them, it raises their own awareness.
Yeah, well, thanks. How are we doing for time, Alice, on this first question?
We've got 25 minutes.
25 minutes left. Excellent. I must say that the comments are so articulate, so well thought out so far.
Can you restate the question for those who are just coming?
Sure. Two questions today. We're about halfway through. Number one, what are the goals for Occupy Chapel Hill Scarborough?
What are the goals for Occupy Chapel Hill Scarborough?
What are the best tactics?
What are the best tactics to accommodate those goals?
Heidi?
My name is Heidi. We are facing the perfect storm of climate change, resource depletion, food and water, migration because of climate change, overpopulation. We're using 1.5 Earths right now, and it is unsustainable. So part of the Occupy movement, I think, we should focus on building kind of Noah's Ark at the local level that sustains communities, because we're coming into very difficult times, and we need to replace profit with quality of life. We need to replace competition with solidarity, and we need to create sustainable communities where our survival is assured, and that of our environment as well.
Thanks, Heidi. Brian.
What I like about Occupy Chapel Hill and about the Occupy movement generally is that it creates a space for dialogue and a space of encounter in which people who don't necessarily all have the same perspectives but have some of the same problems come together and talk about how to solve those and try out different solutions, different responses. Speaking personally about my own goals, not necessarily the goals that I would project onto this movement, I believe that capitalism itself is fatally flawed, and that if we got rid of the 1%, somebody else would take their place and touch the dynamics that keep our society running. So that it can't just be a personalized struggle against a particular demographic, but it has to be a transformative approach to the ways that we live and relate to each other. Now, not everybody here probably sees things the way that I do, because that way of framing the question implies that what's important is not incremental gains or reforms, but fundamental transformation. I'm not saying that everybody here should see things the way I do, but that what this being a space of encounter means is that we should maximize the ways that it equips us to find each other, to become powerful together, maybe in ways that won't always unify us, but at least in ways that will create some sort of harmony between our different efforts. That's what I would like to see from this, and what I think is realistic, given the diversity.
Thanks, Brian. Wow. Mike.
I believe in what I call radicalism. It comes from the Latin word roots. Radicalism. And I think the way it should apply to this movement is to keep our goals simple, just a few things that we're asking for, and radical in the sense that they go to the very heart of how the system works to create this imbalanced system we've got. I've got 5 ideas that I think are great. I think banking and monetary reform would completely change things. I'm a fanatic about it. I've been into it for about 4 or 5 years now. Taking away corporate personhood and creating charters that demanded worker and community participation in every company over 100 people. Getting money completely out of politics. Individual donations only, plus public funding. No more than $100 a person. So any average person could get it. Just these 3 things would radically change the system. I would add a couple of more. Radical tax reform that would tax the rich. Radical cutting of the military budget. Just those 5 things that you could concentrate on. Simple things that would change everything else, because the root of most of these problems, and that's why I mentioned the banking and monetary thing first, is lack of money. And the Republicans have got some good points. We can't stay in debt forever. There's ways to overcome it in the short term, but with the current way we do money, debt is just constantly building up. With monetary reform, we can wipe that out and never have any debt again. Anybody wants to talk about that, I'll be glad to talk about it. But I think just those 5 things, to concentrate on that instead of like looking at the hundreds of different little tiny reformist issues that the left and progressive groups have been aiming at for so many years. Go for something that's exciting, something big that will change the way we do everything else.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks. Ainsley.
I see the Occupy movement as a physical representation or tangible representation of a spiritual transformation that's taking place. And that ultimately the goal of which would be to put people's needs ahead of money or individual agenda. I feel like it's happening.
Thanks. Thanks.
I think I agree with this perspective of this serving as like a common space. There are so many diverse perspectives on who or what our issues are. It's been one of the criticisms leveled against the left that we don't have any unity, and that expectation we should just not pursue. The best thing we could do is support each other and recognize that there is a systemic problem that we're up against. And as much as we're here locally working on these issues, understand how it touches down locally and support each other in that work as much as and as best as we can. There are all kinds of issues. Like, for example, the buses that are free now require advertisement from the same corporations that are the reason why the buses are in danger of being free. They don't pay enough taxes. So how can that be, and what are we going to do about it? Those questions of like high rent on the street. Why is that? Well, there are corporations that can sit on properties for a while and jack up the rent. So what are we going to do about that? Are we going to, there are different approaches as we've seen, and I suggest that we should implement all of those approaches as best we can. And the other thing is, as we've seen this past week, there is a paramilitary presence in our communities, and we've got to question that too. And kick it out of our communities, because that's just a dangerous trend that we shouldn't be allowing. Just the use of machine guns against unarmed people.
Did you get an answer?
Can I answer first? Can I answer one more thing? Sure. There's a whole body of literature now on the militarization of our police, and really putting in paramilitary thugs in police force. So that's why I'd like to have identified in our own communities, what kind of presence that has who's been hired and what the references are. It has to be addressed. It speaks to the comments that I've made before that people will be addressed.
Thanks for your question. Other comments? Stephanie.
Mic check.
Sorry.
Jinx.
There were so many great issues raised. One that I think we can make huge progress on. We're spending way too much money. Jails and prisons. For a start, let's limit that. Let's limit that to people that are there for crimes like murder, rape, that need to be distinct from society. And let's take what we say and use it for crime prevention rather than crime punishment.
Handful of people just arrived. Okay, yeah, Laura, welcome everybody who's just arrived.
Sorry, I'm late.
A roundtable discussion today. 2 principal questions. Number 1, which we're almost done with, I think. What are the goals for Occupy Scarborough and Chapel Hill? And number 2, what are the tactics that best accommodate those goals? Alice, how are we doing for time?
15 minutes and 35 seconds.
Thanks. Great. Other comments? Just an observation at this point that we haven't heard too much about the planet. I know many people here feel strongly about it. So, Ms. Feldman, would you like to?
No, I was just agreeing.
Right.
Yeah, just a comment.
On this hot November day.
Exactly.
I definitely agree with you. I've felt like this movement has been largely social-based, and certainly climate justice does bridge that gap. So if I was going to put a goal, it would be the dissolution of industrial civilization, which is incompatible with life on this planet. I have to make that one of our goals. It hasn't been up till this point, and that's actually been a real point of sadness for me.
And I think kind of along with that, I've heard a lot of people talk about reforming this, that, or the other so that we have it better in this country. And I don't really understand what's so special about this country. And so given that, both with some of the things already said and with the comments just made on the environment, I think taking a long, hard look at the system, and rather than just saying real quick, like, we should change these things so that we can have it back to before 2008, or we can have it back to when we were comfortable, we need to start examining things both environmentally and socially so that, you know, we have some sort of level of focus.
I hope you can act in question number 2 concerning taxes.
I'd be glad.
Just following up on what Dr. David said, I think one of the real challenges and opportunities for the movement is to instigate the big rethink. We need to rethink what the hell is what's happening in the society, what's happening in the world, what's happening in the climate, and you know, we need to, let's face it, it's an international movement. And I think it's a real opportunity to be a catalyst. If that's not a forum, that's action forum. I mean, you know, talk, think, act, you know, all of that. But that big rethink is something that I think we at the deep rethink is what we've got to do about.
Thanks, Pete.
I'm Gala, I'm from Israel, and my flatmates always tell other people, oh, this is Gal, our flatmate, and she's going now to Occupy, and she's so much more active than us, although she's not even an American. And I'm like, my point is that it's true that I'm not an American, but there is actually something special about the USA, because still it's a very great power internationally. It's a very great economical and political power around the world. So a lot of what, like, the results of this worldwide revolution are going to have a lot to do also with what the results of our Occupy USA going to happen. So we have to also keep that in mind, that when we're acting here, we have responsibility for greater than the US, but also it extends to a responsibility for transforming a country that is still an empire and still influences and controls a lot of other countries.
Wonderful. Thanks. That's probably the most affirming position on our country in the last 5 years. Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much. Am I going in order? Or Cheryl and then Steve, because Steve is our okay.
Could you speak up, please?
Here's a discussion about social my first thought is to be replaced by what? And this issue that I stand out here with this sign for is a perfect example of a system being totally destroyed without any clear plan or any method of taking care of these people. North Carolina in 2000 deconstructed their mental health care system, and they closed hospitals, and we're going to have community-based mental health care, but that mental health care is not implemented. They didn't fund it, and now our children are being sent out of state for mental health care treatment, and they're having to be replaced from out of state treatment center in Virginia to other facilities as far away as Florida because sexual abuse was going on in Florida, Virginia. So that's one of the issues that I would like to discuss. How do we move from one system to another system without things getting
if I'm thinking about
worse?
Okay, thanks, Daryl. Thanks. Steve, I think you were next, and then Candace.
So another problem of reactive social justice people is burnout. And so I've valued all the sort of what's been described as space for encounter here. I think of it as intentional alchemy, where you sort of find some common ground. But I was also hoping that people would share on a more personal note at some point, and maybe it's not for today, but what really energizes them, what kind of actions, what kind of things energize them, because if we're going to sustain ourselves, we need to be focusing on what our own personal, we got to sort of marry what we think society at large needs to do to change, but we also have to marry that with what keeps us going.
Thanks, Steve. Candace?
I think this is more so with what we were talking about with global problems. I think for me it's helpful to think about social injustice as this tree that is just sucking the life out of the planet. It's a bad metaphor because it's a tree, but it works because trees have branches and leaves, and they also have superficial roots, and then they have a taproot. We can hack away at the limbs on the tree, and that will cut off some of the ability to generate from the tree's ability to generate some sunlight or whatever. So we can keep whittling away at the tree, but we also have to work on taking the roots out, which are, I guess I think of like the deeper problems like capitalism and the problem of the money system. So I think it's important to while you're like, you shouldn't discredit any attempt to hack at the limb up here, but you should also continue to work at the roots. And I think all of those approaches need to be used in our struggle here.
Yeah, amazing, Candace. I've never seen a tree used as that kind of metaphor. Usually it's the other way.
It's
an even tree.
Love it. I think Ainsley, and then Miriam, and then Brian. Okay.
So to talk about the question, what will happen once this system is defunct, the infrastructure will still be there. And so we could just reuse and reoccupy the same infrastructure with a whole different a whole different intention. So it's not like we're going to start from scratch entirely. Even if we do have a complete revolution, there's a lot of infrastructure that could just be reused in different ways.
Thanks, Ainsley. And I think Miriam.
Anyone who hasn't spoken before?
I would just say check behind you. We have the
any other people who haven't spoken?
Please, Kathy, or let me know somehow when you want to make a comment. Miriam?
I want to, and this may segue into the next section, but I really want to walk away from here with assignments. And I haven't had a continuing conversation. But I'm hearing the importance of global and a climate observation and analysis that we bring that nobody else in this community is doing. I think that is an extraordinary opportunity. The second thing I'm hearing is that if we're going to capture people into this conversation, which is one of the things I mentioned earlier, really building the movement, every social struggle, and we can identify them. We want to talk about police. Where is the NAACP, for example, that's been working on that question in our local community for decades? We need to be out in the community, and people are going to need, like the abolitionist phrase, there's got to be something for everyone to do. So I think we need to capture the struggles that people are already involved in with a micro-analysis as to how it really impact. And I love the idea of personal stories and remind us that somebody said redefine what a beloved, define what a beloved community should look like. And there are people working on that now. You mentioned the economic justice stuff. There are people around the state that are struggling that would love our leaders to love
I'm deeply inspired by what Steve said, and that resonates very much with my experience in social movements and activist organizing. So often people try to do things that they think should happen, and then they wish someone would do. And that is ultimately a recipe for burnout, and you're just doing something, you're hoping to do it just long enough for somebody to take it over for you. I think that if we want to have a sustainable long-term movement or shared project that acting from the things that we really want to see most is the way to not only to make it easy for us to continue in that, but also to make it attractive, productive to other people, make it a space where we really do what we most dream of being able to do. And that if we speak from that place, honestly, from our real aspirations, not scaling them down, it's not realistic, that what we do may actually be more powerful and be more effective.
Thanks, Brian.
That was just an extended twinkle to Steve.
On what Brian said and what Candace said, some of us won't go farther than others, but there's also a danger in if we reject reform that doesn't go far enough and get nothing. Staying step in the right direction is something you want to get behind and keep pushing the line that it's not quite what you want to do. Push more at the same time. If it still benefits your causes, you get behind that as well, because any move in the right direction is still an improvement.
Is Obama in the right direction, you think? Just a point of process here. We're making individual statements here. Next question will concern tactics. Then we have about 45 minutes for open discussion. And that would be an appropriate time. So don't mean to cut you off at all. We just want to honor our process. Good. And I think Dave was next to me, the gentleman, James. That's there. And I'm sorry, but I want to get Alice in here also. Let's extend 5 minutes. Okay?
All right. Point of process. Could you just restate the question for some people who have arrived and the gentleman here, in case they want to participate?
Could be a good idea.
Sure. Roundtable discussion today, focusing on 2 questions. Number 1, we're almost at the end. What are the goals of Occupy Chapel Hill Carborough? Followed by the second question, what are tactics appropriate to accommodate those goals? Third part of the program today, open discussion where folks can go back and forth or query each other in very civil ways.
Yeah, 2 things. I guess first, going on that comment, I think the converse is also true. Like if you see it just as being reformist, but there happens to be a more radical or revolutionary or whatever you want to term it, action that's taken, whether or not you choose to be part of it, you can still put yourself behind it and show that support and say, maybe this isn't something that I'd personally be involved in, but this is still going in the same direction that I'm talking about. So I think that there's a lot to be said on that topic from both sides. And also as far as looking at, I think it's important when discussing systems and changing systems and what are we going from where we're at, in critiquing systemic changes that have already happened, being aware of the fact that those changes happen within a system. And so while the reason presented for moving stuff may be, well, we want to create this communal healthcare option, given that we live in a capitalistic society, and I really don't know much on the specific issue mentioned, but there's plenty of other documented cases where the change was made for economic or budgetary reasons and presented as, well, hey, this will be a boon to the community, and then we see that the later promised funding or whatever the follow-up piece of capitalist or other currently existing systemic infrastructure is never manifest because it was never meant to manifest because it doesn't benefit anyone within the paradigm. And
anyone being people who stand together. So I think just something to be aware of as we critique changes within the system and changes in the system.
Yeah, wow. Thanks, Dave. Gentlemen, and then James, and then Alice. No, and then Alice. I think that'll conclude question number 1. So, please.
My name's John, and I think one of the powerful things about the Occupy movement is it sees the big picture. And all the ideas that people have said about letting specific issues be supported is important. Mental health care, and the police, and the environment. But I think what we have to do with each of those issues is support it and connect it. The reason there's not money for the mental health care is because it's going to the military, it's going to these corporations. And if we keep bringing in where the money's going, why we need to bring it back to the people, then everything that's going on in the community can be supported. We just have to make that connection.
Thank you, John. Wow. Final comment for question 1, and then I have an observation too.
I just wanted to say something. I want to speak kind of personally. I'm here as someone that felt this is the uprising I've been wishing for, seeing how things seem to be getting crazier and crazier when you read the news, and I think the rich should pay their fair share of taxes, and even though I'm highly educated and hardworking, I don't feel like I'm just getting by, and somehow that doesn't seem right. That rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. The environment, we need to pay attention to that. I mean, I sort of agree with everybody. I'm just here because I want to be part of something that I can agree with, and I, as a Quaker, was very excited to see that this group is run by consensus. That's how we do our business meetings, coming from a place of believing there's out of God in every person, and you should answer to that in each other and bring that out in each other.
Thank you so much, Alice. Thank you very much. We have reached the end of discussion time for question number 1. If there was a comment that you wanted to make, you can still do that during the open discussion time. And I just want us to note and acknowledge at this point that Becca has been recording the whole time, and Heather and James have been taking notes. So can we give it up for just a second, please, for the...
I like to be behind the camera, not you.
Now, as we move into question number 2, which is what are the tactics that can best accommodate the goals that we have just articulated so well. Of course, we are still in the wake of the events of last Sunday and the way the police behaved to a group of peaceful occupiers inside a neglected building on Franklin Street. That's what prompted this roundtable today. So I would ask, when you answer this question, or when you put something on the table, that you simply think in practical terms, about what are the tactics where you can get, maybe not the most buy-in, but that will work to accommodate the goals that are important to you. You are a member of Occupy Chapel Hill Carborough for certain reasons that you feel deeply, spiritually and morally and politically. But to make it happen, tactics often is the crucial thing that means success or something else. In our group, we have a tremendous wealth of organizers here, people who in some cases have spent their lives organizing around issues. There's a lot of incredible experience here. This next 45 minutes could change lives, I would dare say. There's so much knowledge here. So we'll begin.
45 minutes for this or 35?
Let's go with 35 minutes. Just let me know when they say.
All right, I'm starting it.
as a way to further your goal in a specific situation, and they can be valuable or not useful depending on what you're trying to do. So I don't want it to be like bad in all situations, but it's good in all situations.
Yeah, excellent framing comment. Starting off the discussion. Samara, I would also ask you, if you don't have to do it now, but if you want to put examples on the table about appropriate tactics in different situations, I think that would be a valuable idea. So, at your pleasure, whatever. Mike and James and Miriam.
I think the timing of particular tactics is important. I agree with her that it's not any particular tactic that's good or bad. It's the timing of it. And I think if you use tactics too soon in a movement, you risk turning people off. When you've got 3% of the population or 5% of the population behind you, there are certain tactics that you don't want to use until you've got like 75 or 80%. Then you can be more combative. Then you can take over things. Then you can be more confrontive. But when you've only got 5% behind you and 5% even understand what you're talking about, you're just muddying your message by rah rah. We got everybody behind us. Let's do this. Let's It's great. It's like I admire the impetus to want to do that, but when you've only got a few people behind you and you're at the very beginning of a movement, it's just not appropriate.
Thank you, sir. I just want to make a comment before we continue. One way that this next 45 minutes can be extremely valuable is if we are specific. We are sort of beginning by generalizing. We have an action that happened last week that the whole community and in some cases the whole country knows about now. That could be something that you apply your position on tactics to, or it could be local energy, it could be the tuition hike across the street that $2,800 over 5 years. So I think if you touch down on something specific with tactics, that would be extremely valuable to everyone. So I think James was next, and then Steve and Sammy. I hope that's right. Heidi.
So in two parts, just one as a framing thing again. Just trying to be careful because I know a lot of us are very passionate about specific positions. There's something beautiful that we said just previous to this was that we want to present a situation in which we can be heard and respected for that, and also in which we can start looking at sort of moving forward with each other, even if our tactics are different, whether they're revolutionary or reformist, so on and so forth, if they're aiming for a certain goal, that we can kind of stand in solidarity behind that. And that also means that we don't have to agree with or own these things, but we do have to support other people, potentially who do, or at least say this is a space for you as well, even if we fundamentally disagree with those tactics. Because that's just going to create a diversity of tactics, or at least the potential for a diversity of tactics. Which if we don't have, the movement will very easily get stopped. It will very easily get blocked because we are disallowing ourselves certain options and possibilities and are instead sort of sticking with only very specific things which can be more readily combated by the other side, the 1%, whoever we're talking about. I would argue that something we should do when discussing tactics specifically, not right now, is look historically at tactics and how they've been carried out, and really try and get an actual historical understanding of them rather than a kind of ultra politicized or sort of narrative understanding. So looking at India's sort of independence, or looking at the civil rights movement and understanding the diversity of components there, not just that we've got these sort of well-known stories about Gandhi being a sort of nonviolent figurehead who was huge, and it was his nonviolent movement that succeeded, but also understanding that there were militarized Sikhs, that there was a lot of sort of pressure on Britain occurring through economic losses and human losses through violence and through other means, and sort of understanding whether or not we like nonviolence or violence or anything in between, that there was a lot going on in these specific movements, and if we want to truly reference them, then we need to reference them as they actually occurred, not as we wanted them to have occurred, and thereby we can kind of begin to look at where we are and start to hear each other a little bit more accurately and in the light of a little bit more of a diverse playing field, which I think if we're all passionate about this, if we all want to see whatever kind of change, I think we need to be willing to listen to how that can actually occur.
Thanks, James. And I messed up a little. I think I overlooked Mike. I think I mentioned Sammy and Heidi, so be patient with me, but James is going to help me with staff now, so it'll be more orderly. Thanks, James. Mike?
I guess the first thing I'd like to address is that the idea of getting 80% of the population behind us. No social movement in U.S. history, or South African apartheid, or even Irish independence, has ever had 80%. Way more 80% or way elected by 60%. Right? So we can basically throw out the notion of getting this huge mass behind us. I would also point out that as far as gauging on buy-in, the initial Wall Street demonstrators did not have even a large percentage of New York behind them when they said, we're taking Zuccotti Park. And they didn't ask the landlord's permission before they did it. They said, we're taking it, and then the landlord said, all right, you guys can have it. Right? A private park. They showed up to Wall Street planning to occupy Wall Street, which would have also been illegal. And that is why they were forced out of it. As far as potential buy-in and timing for it, 5% would actually be a huge percentage, given social movements in this country. But I would say that in all actuality, simply looking at what happened in practice, buy-in for the action that happened down the street was 70 people. Now, to give you an idea, the day of bank demonstrations we had buy-in of 15 people. The second day of bank demonstrations we had buy-in of 15 people. Most of our General Assemblies have buy-in of 30 to 40 people. A demonstration on Sunday night around what happened had buy-in of 100 people. And the march, and the Occupy March in solidarity with the other with the other Occupy movements, which are being repressed by police, and that was why that march was had buy-in of over 100 people. So looking at what actually achieved buy-in versus a theoretical people that are this strange amorphous group that may or may not support us, but actually looking at numbers on the ground, I think it's fairly clear what draws buy-in. And I think we'll also have evidence of this come Monday night. We can see what kind of buy-in we get for this demonstration at town council, which I know the newspaper didn't say, but we're actually getting to the police station at 6 on MLK, and then demoing there for a minute, and then marching in.
I agree with Mike's sentiment. The question of waiting for buy-in, there was a sense of that before this movement started, that there was work to be done. But the wave is one that's rolling and has to be ridden. And for example, in the climate movement, the idea of convincing people who aren't convinced yet about climate change is not something discussed by anyone who's working on that. So it's just a waste of time. So in that same thinking, if people aren't aware of all the craziness that has been happening within the past 6 years, it's only because of the power of mass information and media. And to think that we will have too much of a say in how we get represented through those narratives is to fool ourselves. We can't be playing to those kinds of representations. The best we can do is to do it to ourselves here in community and knowing firsthand what we're really about. So I think that that what we really have to strive for is to respect each other's ultimate goals and really look at the consequence of the various tactics that we do and try to listen to and see what those tactics bring to light. For example, at the Yates action, it's appalling to me that this question of the illegality of violating private property is more salient to some than the fact that we've had people with machine guns pointed at them. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Thank you, Coach.
Hey, I just had a quick point of process. We have a student here who's with Carolina Week, and she would like to film the group. And so I wanted to check in since that's how we normally do it. She can definitely set up if somebody doesn't want to be on her camera. She can set up in a way that you're not included. Is there anybody who has a problem with being on camera for Carolina Week, which is a what student? A UNC student produced TV show. Her name is Rima. Does anybody have a problem with being on camera?
Yes.
No. Okay. Anybody have a problem? Okay.
Thank you, Country. In that light, I also want to notice, I don't mean to make anyone uncomfortable here, but there was a reporter here from the News Observer taking notes and marks of the decision not to bet. I just want to let folks know, and it's no commentary on anything, okay? That's all. And I think next in the stack was Pete and then Ruth. Okay. Pete was next?
No, I think
Brian Lowe waiting for a long time.
Whoever spoke.
Can we have a review of the statute?
Yeah, right.
Some of us got left out.
Yeah, sorry about that. I should have had someone on it.
Who all has their hand up? Everybody put their hands up? They switch back in order and go right
So we're going to go with...
We need a new stat taker. I'll take stat.
Thank you, Steve. So we're going to go in order here with Maria, Brian, Dave, Kathy.
We're going around this way.
Alice, Miriam, and Pete.
We missed Gal on that.
Yeah.
Put me in the game.
Okay.
So I want to thank Vincent for posting this to Facebook last night. It's the call to action for Occupy Wall Street September 17. Happy birthday to me in the neighborhood movement. We call for protests to remain active in the city. Those already there to grow, to organize, to raise consciousness for those cities where there are no protests, for protests to organize and disrupt the system. 2, we call for workers to not only strike, but seize their workplaces collectively and to organize them democratically. We call for students and teachers to act together to teach democracy, not merely the teachers to the students, but the students to the teachers, to seize the classroom and bring minds together. 3, we call for the unemployed to volunteer, to learn, to teach, to use what skills they have to support themselves as part of the role of people as a community. 4, we call for the organization of people's assemblies.
Speak up a little bit. Sorry.
We call for the organization of people's assemblies in every city, every public square, every township. 5, we call for the seizure and use of abandoned buildings, of abandoned land, of every property seized and abandoned by speculators, and for the people, for every group that will organize them. We call for a revolution of the mind as well as the body politic. That was the OWS call to action statement. I can get behind all of that.
Thanks, Maria. Brian?
Okay, I just want to talk about how social movements take off. I don't think it's just from the discussion of opinions in a vacuum. I think that we pose questions with our actions, and that when we act to show that another way of life is possible, then it becomes possible for other people to imagine that this is the case. In reference to the occupation of the Chrysler Building, that was unimaginable a week and a half ago. Almost no one could have imagined taking over a building and beginning to transform it into a social center. But by Sunday afternoon, there was a rudimentary kitchen, a rudimentary library, and plans for many other things in this building. And it was possible for the 100-some people who had passed through the building to feel in their bodies from their lived experience that this was possible. Now, this is not just important for those 100 people. I was in Washington, D.C. yesterday, and the Franklin School was a building that was used for the public for a long time, but the city of D.C. is about to sell to a private entity. And the Franklin School building was occupied yesterday by a coalition of different social movements and individuals that held it all afternoon, arguing for it to be used for the public and not to be sold to private interests. And I want to say that many of the people who participated in that occupation were inspired by what we did here in Chapel Hill. So even if they seem crazy at first, even if they seem like outlying actions, they spread the field of possibility. I want to end by saying that the Franklin School building had been used as a homeless shelter from 2003 to 2008 because it was occupied in 2002. So there are precedents for outliers, for people at the radical fringe, doing things that open up space to materially solve our problems. And that this is one of the things that I can imagine us accomplishing together. That's why I'm inspired constantly by all of you and glad to be here.
Is that right? I mean, somebody hasn't spoken on this question. You have not? Okay.
Well, in line with that, in looking at both the occupation of Franklin in D.C. And looking at the occupation of foreclosed homes in Portland, and even if we leave out the other occupied buildings that are going on, in both of those situations, there are community meetings now scheduled to engage in discussion over what to do about these occupied spaces, bringing in the community rather than just saying, no, you can't have it. So in those cases, politically, there has been dialogue opened on that. And looking at this movement historically from its start in mid-September, when you look at the events that have really inspired press coverage and media coverage, you've got, the breakthrough the media blackout with the occupation of the Brooklyn Bridge and nearly 800 arrests. You've got the huge march to Times Square that had all kinds of police brutality, but further publicized the movement and led to several other direct actions that came from that. When you look at the first general strike, successful general strike in something like 65 years in Oakland, and the temporary shutdown of the port, and the building occupation there, and you take into account now as a result of that, Dallas is calling for a general strike on the 30th, and then if you look at the recent day of action with over 32,000 people coming out based on police estimates, and the statements made in that event by numerous people who said it was their first day out, who were inspired by seeing so many people in the streets, who never conceived of the fact that the New York public education system would consider closing school and everything else that happened. I think what you see is a very clear trend of some of these envelope-pushing actions being the sort of actions that call people to this movement, that show people that the things that they've been lying down and taking for the last 40 years don't have to be, and that they've got some opportunity to put their voice out there beyond a broken political system. That's really empowering. And I think that I really don't think that there's any different conclusions to draw from what we saw at Yates and the rhetoric and discussion that has followed from that. So, just my thoughts.
From my goal, which was to create a new society that is based on society, not on businesses, I see the best tactic to be to create and be in the new society, to forget about this broken system that doesn't work of these cities based around businesses and not having the only space in an entire town where people can meet and come together, be outside of a post office, to just forget that that world exists, come here, live here, make this our world. That's what I see the best tactic being.
Sure. Thanks, Kathy.
So I would like to thank Cassandra for going back a little bit to this place that we've started in and as a risk of being boring to be inspiring, I want to introduce RGA. I would like to talk a little bit about kind of more specifically and not so much ideologically about tactics. I agree with a lot of the things that have been said here. Nevertheless, I would like to say what I believe tactics should look like in general. I think that it's very important that we have this place here, with or without tents, by the way. For me, it's kind of the same. But that we have this place here where people know they can find us and join us. And I think it's equally important to have a lot of actions that go out there and be it a bank march, be it something more radical that I personally can't take part of so they can get arrested, be it going to teaching in the university and things that we haven't done yet, like I don't know, reaching out to other people who engage in social activities and so on, to kind of bring people together. And I one thing that I would like to happen here. I mean, the actions that go out. I mean, something that we've done periodically, and I think it's awesome. I think a lot is being done, and a lot more things will be done. About this place here, I think that we have to enhance our presence in this place, not in the sense of having more or less tents, but in the sense of letting people know what we're here about. When someone walks here in the street, if they don't already know what we're about, they might not know because there are no signs. Because also I was talking to people, even at the underground party on Sunday. Okay, I'm out of town. Finish your sentence. Okay, I got comments from people telling me that this place is not inviting enough for community. Turning this place into a more fun place, a more inviting place, including some art, some music, some family-friendly activities, would be suiting that, and having some more signs, some more clarifications around here with future things that I would like on the descriptive level.
Thanks.
Break.
believe it is me, but anybody here had on staff?
Alex is right here. I'm after you.
Okay. All right. Good.
He wanted to.
So, my specific action, I mean, I come to this from seeing that the problem with our system now is that our leaders do not represent us. They represent the people who pay their money to get them elected. And so you've got lots of money coming in, so basically it's an election problem, a system problem that can be fixed through a constitutional amendment now. So, you know, I actually checked, and there are now 2 constitutional amendments in the making throughout the country to make it so that Congress is able to legislate how elections can be run. Now they can't because the money is free speech now, so that has to be changed. And these amendments have a way to take away corporate Christendom. I think it's very easy. First of all, the loony right and the loony left can agree on this. I mean, if we're even partly loony of the left, our election. I think that just in North Carolina, we can make sure that our elected leaders become co-sponsors on these bills. This is something that we can do very specifically, and I think a lot of people can get behind that sort of thing. So that would be my specific action.
At our Friends meeting, Peace and Social Concerns meeting, I got Terry and Steve came up with some kind of cool ideas. I think we could network with other peace and justice organizations and perhaps find a house in our community that's facing foreclosure through the robo-signing illegal stuff and go be a presence there to make us think about it. That would be one specific thing. We also have someone in our meeting, I think she's going to come maybe later today, Ann Shai, who's an attorney, who said there is a foreclosure clinic run through the Central Law School, and talk about a way to have that happen here as a community service through whatever technological means it could happen. But those are 2 ideas I think the wider community would think were really good and we would expand interest and support.
Going this way, who's next? Yuri?
I want to pick up on foreclosure, and I want to say back to David said, because I really would like more conversation on this. You mentioned the Franklin School. I know the Franklin School has struggled with foreclosed homes, which you just mentioned, the Brooklyn Bridge, the Oakland. Happen to know the history, many of us do, of the ILC, International Longshoremen, who helped the occupiers close down the ports. We need to know them, which gets back to my original mission statement. We need to broaden the conversation on the movement. And I want to say, then address Mike, about the 80% to 60%. I think you may be right on a state and a national. I'm not sure, actually. I think it's growing. But on a local level, I think we have a good command, a lot of support. If we keep building up these local movements, I think it's going to move. I think it's going to move its way up. So I think the term you use, I think the wave is rolling, and we've already changed the term of debate. I want to, again, I said earlier, I want to come out. Oh yeah, there's a real underlying important debate here, and I don't think we're going to finish it today. But I don't want to say debate, but important conversation. Stephanie earlier in the first part mentioned, don't dismiss reforms, and many of us have been talking about those reforms that have captured the interest, the struggle, and the oppression, I might say, and you mentioned the foreclosed home, and it's right here, and we need to act right here. Don't dismiss reforms if they're in the right direction. Well, there were a lot of people that were working on strategic planning for affordable housing, which is being violated by every single private developer in this place. Not Yates, but the private developers that are closing down the colony apartments, which is the conversation I want to have. It isn't so much Yates, it's where could we have educated, that's the struggle I'm at, where could we have educated and maybe focused our energy and looked to the future as to where we could really make a difference in people's lives right now. And I just mentioned the housing as an example. I'm sorry.
People were so angry when we started.
And how about North? Yeah, and how about North Side? Thank you.
They don't like it no matter what.
Exactly. Wherever, I'm just saying a space where we should think about, because David had mentioned, I said, Stephanie, don't dismiss reforms, because there are a lot of people involved in it. Again, broaden the movement conversation. And then, David, you said, but if people want to go in a more radical direction, they should have the same support. And I want to continue that conversation, John said, because that's the larger architecture of how we relate to one another. And there are some specific suggestions that you mentioned around foreclosures. We mentioned economic work. I have to tell you, the state is going to kill us in this session. If you want to occupy something, we ought to talk about occupying Phyllis and Berger where they live.
Right.
Run them out. And, Mike, you'll have plenty of time to respond to various comments during the discussion.
8.5 minutes left in this.
8.5 minutes left, okay.
Yeah. I want to talk about sort of three phases of building a movement, which always have to be balanced. There's the catalyst piece. And, I agree with much of what was said about the occupying as a potential catalyst to capture people's imagination. It can move beyond what people conceive of. I mean, I'm all for occupying motions, occupying actions in a certain context. Occupying the factories in the city movement in the strikes of the 30s was an incredibly powerful and important tactic. But there's two other phases. One is there's the catalyst, and then there's organizing. And the essence of organizing is going out to people and talking to them, starting where they are, and involving them in the dialogue. When all those people show up in Egypt or Tunisia or these sort of things, it was a catalyst, but it was a hell of a lot of organizing. It wasn't capture things, but it's people going out and talking to people. I think the Occupy movement has not done enough organizing. And if you organize your actions, if you organize speaking to friends or speaking at or the UNC or wherever you can speak about what we're about. And you've got to listen in that organizing process. And then after the organizing, and all this stuff flows and balances, it's not all linear, but there's a mobilizing. And so much of the mistake that groups make is they try to mobilize without organizing. And so they say there's no support. Well, and the point is, I think it's the fact that a number of people don't show up at a particular march or so on. You have to ask yourself, what did we do to organize? What did we do to organize? How did we get outside of our little circle, spread the word? And sending an email is not organized. It's actually talking to people and having developing personal relationships with them, exchanging stories, listening, all that sort of thing. And that's what we've got to do a whole lot more of. And then mobilizing, have thousands of people that are marching in Chapel Hill. It's doable. It's imaginable. And that's what we need to do.
I'm really sad because there are two things that I wanted to comment on. One was more general and one was more specific in regards to...
Louder.
There are two things that I wanted to comment on. One is more general in terms of tactics, and one is specific in terms of what I talked about earlier. I think that what they were talking about was occupying buildings. It's definitely great because illegal isn't necessarily bad. What's illegal is really people taking advantage of our broken system. And I think that we could even tap into our legal team to find out exactly what types of actions should be taken or by the law are supposed to be being taken against us when we do things like this, like when a building is occupied. And that way we can find out when people are acting out of key, when there's unprecedented force, like we saw a few weekends ago. But I think we also, in this light, we also need to be cognizant of when we are becoming abusive. I don't think that what we did down at that building was abusive at all. But I did hear that there was some language used that projects a type of violence. Breaking into that building was not, to me, this is just the way I look at it. Earlier, Brian mentioned seduction as an element of what kinds of actions we like to get involved with. Seduction does have some sort of element of danger, some juiciness to it. And seduction, when I think of seduction, I think of sexuality. Sexuality can be dangerous. Sexuality can be exciting. But I don't know how many of you feel that spanking or hitting or teasing is appropriate or needed to have an orgasm. I don't know if my metaphor is
Put tires up. I don't know about anyone else.
I think it just woke everyone up when you break into a building. But when you're cursing at your partner, I don't know how that can be, if that's going to be taken by your partner the wrong way. I'm trying to come across with a metaphor that I'm not sure if I've developed completely, but I don't know if any of you can understand what I'm trying to say.
Yes, very well.
The partner is like, okay.
I think you're over your time. But you did.
You did good.
Good point.
You did good.
I feel that stay with a partner, but I feel like we can be effective without being violent. We can do things that are illegal without being violent in our case. It could be. It can threaten violence when you're saying pull the cops. That's threatening violence.
Why was that said?
I heard a recording of it on the news server. Sorry.
Candace, during general discussion.
It's still?
I have 3 minutes
Oh,
left.
sorry.
I believe it was Liz next on staff.
Yes. I'd just like to relay some personal lessons I think that I've shown from EST last Sunday. I was there, I got swept up in the rain, it was terrifying but calming. But I think that what I personally learned from that lesson is that and actually a cop who was talking to people on a handcuffs there said, there's an area designated for the protest. There's an allowed area for the protest. You guys have no business. Which really made me think, you're only allowing this because they don't see us making a real change here. And immediately when there were some people who were willing to shake the tree and shake it hard, they cracked down. So as far as practicality goes and realizing the changes that we want to see, we're going to really have to personally analyze our own views on right and wrong and how those correlate or do not correlate with legality and illegality. If we stay within the system, we're going to have a hard time making any strong changes very quickly. And I think they're hoping that we fizzle out.
Thanks, Liz. Comments on the experience left?
You have 1 minute.
To the extent you allow that now?
Of course.
Being the first time here.
Thank you, Alan.
One quick comment. I'm really pleased to be hearing all these wonderful ideas for tactics. I mean, I feel now that we're moving forward. And one idea that was mentioned by you regarding our presence here. I was standing up front waiting for Miriam, and there were people who, because of the basketball game, there were a lot of people who were walking by, and many of them sort of paused and looked to see what was going on. And I was really not. I was just standing down the way a little bit. So we need literature to give out and approach people in a proper manner and speak with them and let people know really why we're here and what we want to do and how it can affect them in their world, which is our world.
I just want to make a comment, Barb, about one point of information that James and the rest of us on outreach are in the final stages of a draft for that very document. Everybody in the school.
Thank you.
Yeah, one more point of information. We do have all sorts of literature directly related to Occupy, even though it's not that specific document from Occupy Chapel Hill. And anyone can hand it out. We just need people here to hand it out, and that can be anyone.
Yeah, that was actually a nice segue for what I was going to mention.
feel welcome and letting people know that this is their space too. I brought this up at the GA last night, and some of you guys heard it before, and I was asked to bring it back to the social discussion. I thought it might be a nice idea to have like a newcomers GA. One day, a lot of people ask me like, hey, I kind of want to come to Occupy, when's a good day to come? And I don't want to tell them to come on a day that there's not a lot of people, or we're kind of bogged down in logistics. So it might be fun to designate a specific day, kind of like a newcomers GA, have food, have it be engaging, have a physical element, have it be energizing and exciting and be cool. Feel like you're a part of it. So I just got to take that back.
Kind of gets back to something several minutes back on foreclosures. All the foreclosure sales are posted at the courthouse. They have to be posted on the bulletin board at the courthouse. So it's easy to find out when they're going to happen. It would be great if we could just show up and protest the foreclosure sales. It'd be a very effective, direct action, very simple. And you know, there's like a dozen of them there in the next 2 months. Even showing up to some of them would send a message that this is something we're trying to stop, this is something we're not standing for, and you know, we can be disruptive enough that maybe they'll have to reschedule these things.
Challenge the bank.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Ricky. I've never been to Occupy before. I just know the area from Greensboro. It's you all. And I just wanted to say I think that there's a conversation happening about the tactics that are not necessarily mutually exclusive. I see, for me personally, being new here, observing what's been happening, I think that the question of illegality and the folks that want to occupy, buildings and spaces in terms of the call to action for Occupy Wall Street, in association with the idea to kind of get out more and talking to folks, connecting with people, doing organizing work, organizing more. I think all of those things come together. And I keep thinking how, I'm in support of what happened, but how much more powerful would it have been if it was this? How much more powerful would it have been? So what about, families and their kids and more people, if that was a more organized action and there were more folks there? I just, and I think what has happened is happening. I don't think it is right.
Okay, that's it, guys. 1 minute stretch break, please. 1 minute stretch break.